Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to be able to speak to you today. Thanks a lot for taking the time. Maybe you could begin with a brief introduction to your film, The Stimming Pool, for people who don't know anything about it. What can they expect going in?
It's quite hard to describe. I always feel like it's like a hybrid fiction documentary film. So yeah, essentially we're a group of autistic artists, and we've come together to create something that sort of represents a sort of autistic point of view in sort of a way that veers away from the traditional ways of doing that. It feels like autistic artists taking control of their own narrative. And so the film is kind of this sprawling series of stories, ideas, and characters that doesn't necessarily fit into these neurotypical structures of film. And it's like a flowing stream of consciousness, essentially, from our artistic practices.
Like you say, I mean, a lot of films that touch on the subject of neurodiversity, it's often outsiders looking in. Why was it so important to completely sort of flip the gaze and flip the creation process and, have this as this collaboration? And how did that all kick off? Maybe from your side, Stephen, how did this collaboration between you guys begin?
Yeah, I like that sort of flipping the narrative. That's exactly where the project began. So we had some support from the Wellcome Trust. In fact, it was the first project the Wellcome Trust has supported to do filmmaking research. And what we wanted to do was bring together autistic and neurodivergent collaborators to co-create a film. In order to do so, we ran lots of workshops, and those workshops were really much more about looking at how the cinema works, how documentary and fiction work, and especially how they work to kind of maintain control of a certain kind of discourse and kind of perpetuate certain language. And we really wanted to think about how we could develop the language of filmmaking and really use the whole frame and think more about flow, as Georgia said, flow states, pattern recognition, nesting of ideas, and less working with kind of explanatory signposting structures. So it was really about how perhaps a community that has traditionally been marginalized or excluded in terms of visual language gets to change the way that we create images.
And of course, when you've got so many people involved in a project, how did you kind of go about making sure each artist sort of had their moment to shine while also making sure the film could then come together as a cohesive whole? What were the sort of logistics of that? And how did you land on the film that we see today?
The co-creation process was it was unique. It's not something I'd ever really done before, thought about doing. But I think because we're all very different as artists and we all have very different focuses and backgrounds, we all brought something really new and unique. And so we kind of had sort of mutual respect and admiration for what each other was doing. I think it became clear quite early on that we weren't going to make something kind of gelled all our ideas together into one sort of story, because our ideas were so different, and it made more sense to create something that had these sort of like episodes and like nested stories that represented each of us. And we used a platform called Mural, which is it's like a digital whiteboard where you can kind of brain dump ideas, pictures, films, inspirations, all of these things, and where we used that each to develop our own ideas and what we wanted to see in the film. And it became this sort of like cell with like branches growing out of it, and it was like a map almost to kind of the ideas of the film, and it got quite big, and we made several of them because we just put so much on there. And I think over time we eventually condensed it until we had one mural that sort of resembles the Stimming Pool now, all these things that we wanted to combine together. And while we were filming, we each of us kind of took control of each scene, essentially. So kind of my main, I'd say, contribution to the creative side of the film was the shapeshifter character. So I would be directing all of the shapeshifter scenes, and Robin would be doing the zombie B-movie sequence, and so on and so forth. So I think there was never really a moment where it felt like we were competing with our ideas, or it felt difficult to get somewhere. I mean, it was a long process, but I think it really paid off because we all just knew each other's ideas had a place in the film. And I think the way it's come together, I think we're all really proud of, because it shows that you don't need to condense things in a way that has to make sense in a logical storytelling way. You know, ideas can sort of overlap and go in and out of each other in sort of a dreamlike flowing way. And that was essentially our process, and it was very exciting. It's not, again, like, it's not something I'd ever seen before or done before, and I'd definitely do it again.
We're really excited to share the method that underpins the film because, as Georgia said, it is a co-created project. It is everybody across all the directors had equal sign-off on the edit. Everybody was involved in every aspect of the production. It wasn't just ideas development. It was everybody had involvement in the sound mix, in the color correction. It was really inclusive across all those spaces. We had an almost entirely autistic cast. A large number of the crew were neurodivergent. It's really horizontal in that respect. We're in a kind of territory and industry that can be very hierarchical. And I think that's been one of the very exciting things about it.
And to watch it, it feels like a very visceral experience. It's like you say, you're kind of putting to the side maybe your sort of preconceptions about, you know, what a film or a narrative should look like. And you kind of enter into a different space when you're watching it. So what do you think the impact of that is on audiences, you know, both just for creating something very new and unique in the artistic space, but also to help people understand what it might feel like to be neurodiverse in a way that perhaps talking about it, you know, or reading about it is not as effective as something like cinema?
It's not something you usually see, as I've said, like autistic filmmakers and artists taking control of their own narrative. And so I think one of the main things I think we want people to take away is that we don't have to continue, you know, films about autism or representing autism from the point of view of a neurotypical person trying to understand and trying to sort of understand the world through this different lens. And instead, it's more autistic people and artists having that equal opportunity to make these films and to tell these stories, and having the resources to do that, and having an accessible environment in order to make that, and that a way for autistic people to make films as possible, essentially. I'd always struggled working on films before because of how inaccessible it was, and, you know, having a fully accessible set with, you know, disabled friendly call sheets and all of these things, it really made a difference. So that's one of the things that I feel like by sharing, like you say, sharing the process of making the film, I hope people can take that away. And I think the film itself and the themes of the film, we wanted it to, again, veer away from this sort of traditional, you know, it's okay to be autistic, and more expressing that through in sensory ways, and rather than educationally and instructionally. It's more normalizing forms of autistic expression and stimming, which is something that is traditionally seen to be like repressed in autistic people, and we have to mask through it. But I think the stimming pool asserts that stimming is something that can be reintroduced into the world and into spaces like the supermarket and the swimming pool and the gym and at home, rewilding these traditionally very oppressive spaces for neurodivergent people on a sensory level. The film sort of ends in this sort of explosion of stimming and joy, and I hope that people can also find some joy in that, and feel that they can stim in their own way. I think that it's something that I think can benefit all audiences. We're not making it just for autistic people or for neurotypicals to learn about autism. I think that's a very important point, is it's not an educational film. It can be, but that's not the purpose of it. It is something that people can find themselves in. Yeah, I hope that people can find something like that in there.
And in the making of it, I mean, like we said, it does sound like it was a wonderful experience, but having so many people involved, shooting on 16mm, were there any really challenging moments along the route? And on the flip side, what was your favorite moment of making the film?
I guess just the whole process of the years we spent on Zoom during COVID. You know, I think we had a lot of obstacles in actually like shooting the film, just because I think we'd initially planned for it to go a lot quicker, and then COVID happened just as we'd formed. So all our planning meetings moved to Zoom, and, you know, we were all in different places. And so it took about 3 years to conceptualize the film. which is a long time. Feels like a long time ago. So that was, I'd say for me, that was the biggest thing, because I think there were points where I felt sort of like, where is this going? Like, how are we going to put this together? Like, it feels very far away. When it came time to shoot, it was all very quick and it all kind of went how we wanted it to go. I think it was a lot of relief on my point that everything came together.
The film, in a very small way, is trying to open up a conversation about a much wider problem, which is, how does the industry operate? How is funding put together? How are those structures accessible? And I think that's a really important conversation that we need to have. I think film, even really well-meaning film, still tends to be quite militaristic. It's like, how long a day can you have? How early can you get up? How fast can you go? And I think we wanted to take a lot of the pain out of those experiences. So we had on-set advocates, we had quiet rooms, we exercised slowness in our decision-making. These are not structures that are typical to a film set at all. And we even attempted at one scene that one of the collective, Sam, led on, which was marshalling 85 extras in a choreographed sort of single take, 2 or 3 minute single take. So we were trying to construct the kinds of environments that some people can find challenging. So that's slightly kind of contradictory in a way, but I think that was challenging, but also really rewarding, I think, for us to think about how can you work with those scales of production in a way that isn't painful and stressful.
And in that sense, I guess the impact of the film, is for the impact it can have on audiences, but also the fact of the way you made it can perhaps, shift the way the industry is functioning. And the more films like this are made in a non-conventional way, hopefully it will open up more opportunities for that in future. Do you see that could be something that changes, or is it a bit slow at the moment?
I mean, I hope so. I think this film, I would hope, is sort of the start of opening up this conversation of, do practices in the industry have to stay the way they are? What is stopping us from introducing things that are more accessible? Because traditionally it's been very hard for autistic people to make it in film and make the things that they want to make, because of all these sort of restrictions in place and it not being accessible. And so, I feel like also the industry is very fast and it doesn't leave a lot of room for people who might need a bit more time, people who feel overwhelmed, people who need time to reflect, and people who have their own ways of being and their own ways of expressing themselves. We often feel alienated by an industry that is so fast and doesn't stop for anyone. And what I really loved about shooting the Stimming pool was, there were times for us to take breaks. I think for one scene, I think I just went back to my Airbnb and slept for like an hour and then came back, because I have chronic fatigue syndrome as well. So it was very important for me to rest. And it was just so wonderful that I was able to rest, because making films is very exhausting and it's emotionally overwhelming as well, especially for people that, have have a sensitive sensory world. And I think it's important to take that into account. So I'd hope that, the more we talk about the process of making the film, the more people can recognize that, you can make changes that benefit people that aren't neurotypical. And yeah, I'm hoping we can open up more of those conversations with the film.
And obviously you've already had the world premiere, but you've got the screening at London Film Festival coming as well, the UK premiere. What has been the reaction to the film so far, and what are you expecting from a London audience?
The reaction's been amazing. I've had a lot of autistic people at festivals just come up to me and say, I haven't seen anything like this before, and I haven't seen myself represented from the point of view of another autistic person, because it always traditionally has been, like I said, a neurotypical person making a film to try and understand autism. And I don't think it really drives home that sense of identification in the same way. So it's been really lovely to hear people affirm essentially what we set out to do. And a lot of people are saying, thank you for resisting traditional structure of a documentary. And I find myself in the structure of the film and not just, the characters or themes in the film. I think the way the film unfolds, a lot of people have found fits with their process of thought and their process of creativity, which has been really, really nice to hear. And it's been doing really well, like internationally. And I think that really is a testament to how unique the film is, and that there really is demand films about this, and films made by autistic people, and films that show that this type of filmmaking is possible.
I mean, we're really excited to have our UK premiere. The BFI kindly gave us 3 slots, and they've all sold out. I think sold out on the day that they became publicly available, which is great. And we're really pleased to be working with the UK distributor, Dartmouth. So we are releasing the film a limited theatrical release in the spring of 2025. So it's just great, isn't it, to discover the film through different audiences.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me, and can't wait for everyone else to have a chance to see the Stimming Pool. Thanks so much.